All right, everybody, welcome back to the best damn training channel on YouTube. Today is Monday, track day here. Last 4 weeks on Monday has been a very general type training program where we've got some jumping, we've did the acceleration bounds with the sled, without a sled, we did some sprints, nothing too specific on that. Today, the format stays very similar, except for we're putting a little bit more specific intent on the sprint section. So we're gonna start off with the triple jumps again. We're gonna move on to an acceleration complex. I'm taking out the acceleration bound work that we did, and I'm getting a little bit more specific because last week when we were running our 40s, if you remember, I had that last 10-meter section that I was measuring. I think my fastest time on that 10 meters was like a 1:03. I noticed that I felt really slow between that 20 to 30 meter mark before I got into kind of like max velocity mechanics. So I decided I'm gonna switch up the acceleration work and we're gonna work on that zone. So we're gonna do 20s and 30s with the sled, and then we're gonna finish off our complexes with a 40-meter sprint. And then we're gonna finish off the day with a lot more on the jumping and the plyo type work. So I've done the majority of my warm up. I'm gonna do some standing triple jumps and slowly progress those in distance as we go. So what I'm gonna do is grab a cone and essentially just do some easy reps until I start getting towards that 9-meter mark, which is where I want my working attempts to be. I'm probably gonna do 3 good attempts if we can maintain that 9-meter, or let's say like an 850 plus type on these triple jumps. So the first one, we're just gonna start off at like 60%. There we have it, that's a 720 on that. And we're gonna just start progressing this and trying to beat that cone every single time as we warm up towards that 9-meter mark. All right, let's beat that 720 here. All right, we got 820 on that one. We'll move that cone again. And I have a feeling this next rep is probably gonna be our first working set for the day. All right, so we're gonna try to send it on this one. My legs are feeling pretty good. That deload week did me right. I woke up this morning feeling real fresh. So I'm expecting some decent numbers on this triple jump today. Ooh. 890 on that one. We're gonna call that rep number 1. Go ahead and pop the top a little bit. I'm gonna count that first one as a good rep. So this is gonna be rep number 2, and we got 3 total here. Oh, that was a good one. 916 on that one. All right, so my best on this so far, so over the course of the last 4 weeks, has been a 920. I just hit 916. I really want to get 920 again. Legs are feeling good. I think it's there. I just got to be able to put it all together and get a good rep here. So last attempt here, we're going to try to fly past that cone again. Oh, it was almost there. It was like 918, 917, so like a centimeter or 2 past that. But 3 good reps, 918, we'll call that pretty damn solid. Now we're gonna load up the sled. We're gonna get ready for the acceleration complex that I got planned for today. All right, so what we're gonna be doing first is that acceleration complex idea that I had during the combine phase, where we did the heavy 7 steps into a moderate sled sprint into an unresisted sled sprint. I'm using that same concept, but we're going heavier to light to unresisted, but we're extending those zones out so I can focus on specific phases during this sprint that I really want to focus on. So like I said, when I ran those 40s last week and I had the cone set up between 30 meters and 40 meters and was just kind of getting a gauge on what that max velo zone might be, I felt that the 0 to 10 was really good. I felt like the 10 to 20, I ended up getting a little bit flat, and then it just kind of carried through and almost felt like I was decelerating probably as I was going through 30 to 40. So I'm using the sled to focus on those zones by loading up 30 kilos on the sled here first, and we're gonna do a couple 20-meter accelerations. What that's going to allow me to do is still blow through that first 10 really fast, but then that 30 kilos is gonna challenge me from 10 to 20 and allow me to really focus on putting in a lot of force on the ground and trying to explode through that 10 to 20 and build that zone that I feel like I'm a little bit flat in. So we're gonna start off with 2 reps of 20-meter accelerations with 30 kilos on the sled. Then we're gonna move to 2 reps of 30-meter accelerations with 10 kilos on the sled. So I'm gonna be focusing the first 2 reps on that 10 to 20 specifically. I'm gonna focus the next 2 reps on that 20 to 30, and then I'm gonna do an unresisted sprint to end the set. We're probably gonna do 2 rounds of that total today. So we got a total of 10 sprints that we're going to do with the 2 heavy, the 2 light, and then the 1 unresisted. So that's rep number 1. The rest in between should be long enough to where you feel like you can do the next rep at maximum intent. And then again, rest as long as you need to do the next rep. So we'll take probably 90 seconds, 2 minutes here, and we'll knock out rep number 2. Before I lighten up the sled and we move into our 30s, I want to talk about the start here real quick. I get a lot of questions about people on like the proper projection angle on the start, how they can work on that. A lot of people feel like they pop up too fast and they're not getting the right projection angle as they're doing sprints. Resisted sprints are a great way to force yourself to get in the proper projection angle, because it's really hard to pop up with a sled and get that sled moving without projecting in the proper angle. But specifically, when you're looking at like a 3-point stance and you're looking at projecting out from that stance, what you should focus on doing when you're doing your sled sprints is trying to push your hand off the ground with your legs. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times the reason why people end up feeling like they're kind of popping up off of the ground is because they get into their 3-point stance and the first thing they do is they pick up their hand and they take off. And what's going to happen when you pick up your hand and you start to run is your shoulders rise and you start to pop up. So what I mean by I want you to push your hand off the ground with your legs is set yourself up in your 3-point stance. Get into that position. First off, that shoulder needs to be directly on top of the hand or slightly above, but rather than picking your hand up off the ground and trying to project yourself forward, push with your legs and allow that hand to come up off the ground that way. So you're not picking yourself up and running, you're pushing your hand off the ground with your legs. So it's almost like your hand's actually going to go backwards. So if you're looking at yourself in a 3-point stance and you see this happen first, where you're picking your hand up off the ground, what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to project in the proper angle, because now you're going to pop up and your shoulders are going to come straight up and you're going to start running more upright than you need to. So what you need to do is think about pushing with your legs and allow that hand to come back, and that's going to help you project yourself off. Now, it's a lot more difficult to train without a sled because you're not going to get as much feedback. A good way to work on this is grab a sled, load it up with a lot of weight. Like put on 50, 60, 70, 80% body weight and go through that motion really slowly and really feel that your legs are initiating that projection. So what's going to happen is you'll set yourself up in your 3-point stance and then slowly just push and feel that the hand comes up and then take off from that position there. So that's a little pro tip on the proper projection from a 3-point stance. That's a cue that I like to use. It may not work for everyone, but when I think about pushing through my legs to get my hand off the ground, that allows me to project through. That hand kind of sweeps back versus picking that hand up and trying to take off in that direction. I'm going to put 10 kilos on the sled and we're going to do a couple 30s now. First round is done. I'm only going to do 2 of those today because I feel like trying to do a third one, that's just going to end up getting sloppy. So we'll stick with 2 rounds on that. I think the resistance and the distance for each of those resistance is really good. So the 30 kilos at the 20 meters and then the 10 kilos at the 30 allows me to get into the positions that I need to, allows me to still kind of increase the velocity based on what we did from the previous block. So doing like heavier sled bounds and acceleration bounds, that kind of stuff. The velocity on those are a lot slower than what we're doing today. So we're progressing in the right mode. load, and then might try to increase the amount of working sets or maybe slightly increase the distance over the next 2 to 3 weeks as we go through this, but I'll make that decision as we continue to build on this first week here. Because like I said, the sprint work is more general. I'm kind of playing around with things. I'm taking a concept that I used for my combine program, and I'm trying to extend that concept into today's session with longer sprints, going from that heavy to moderate to unresisted type sprint, and I really like it so far. Plan is, after you finish one full round, you want to rest about 4 or 5 minutes, try to get close to like full recovery as you can, and then again, knock out next round after that. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to rest up a little bit, load the sled back up to 30 kilos, and then we'll get after round 2. All right, we're going back to the seated broad jump again. Going to be doing 3 sets of 4 on this, and I feel like this box keeps getting higher. So I'm going to measure this out real quick. Yeah, last week it was at 63. Today it's at, okay, 65. So there's like 1 extra mat. But for whatever reason, every week I come out here, it ends up getting taller and taller. We're at a slightly higher box on the landing, but that don't matter. I'm gonna do the same thing, just kind of start off shorter distance and extend these out. So I'll do this first one is kind of like a warm-up set. Takeoff point right here is about 1.90 meters. All right, we're good. 2 reps on the warm-up set is good. So I'm gonna bump this back. We'll start off at about like 220 from a takeoff point. Do a set there. We'll scoot it back a little bit each round, and we'll do 3 sets of 4 on this total. All right, so feet right here, toes are right around 220. So takeoff point will be roughly 220 on this. Boom, we'll scoot it back a little bit. We'll do another set of 4. All right, we got a takeoff point of about 250, 240, somewhere around there. All right, last set of 4. We're just gonna scoot it back each rep slightly, try to build towards like max effort type stuff on this broad. Oh. I feel like I'm gonna scoot the box back, and then I'm gonna keep creeping forward with where I sit on the box, because I kind of get this mental block when I get towards this 260 mark. We'll send it on this. Oh, I was unsure of that in the air. I felt like I stuttered mid-air on that one. Like I was like, ugh. That was a weird feeling. But we'll go one more. We'll just try to send it deep on this one. If we bust our ass, we bust our ass. Ooh, nope. Got in my head. Come on, send it. It's too far. I'm in my head right now. All right, let's scoot it back. We'll get a comfortable one in. I shouldn't be clearing it like that and being scared of 10 centimeters. Good God. All right, last 2 things here for the plyos is going to be a single leg depth drop, and then we're going to move on to altitude drops onto both legs. So really what I'm doing is just switching up the stimulus a little bit on this. I've been doing depth drops off of 2 feet and my altitude drops onto 1 leg. I'm just switching those 2 up just to get a little bit different of a stimulus. It's generally going to be the same thing, but what I'm looking at doing is going off of a low box, 4 reps on each leg. We're going to do a few sets of that, and then after we finish those, we're going to go to a high box on an altitude altitude drop landing on both legs rather than one. When I say low box for a single leg, low box for me is generally like mid shin height, somewhere around there. So this is slightly above that, but it's okay. If I'm saying like I'm gonna go from like a moderate height, then I'm looking at somewhere that's gonna be just below the knee. And if I'm going from a high box for a single leg depth jump, then I'm looking at that box being above knee height. For me, that's how I like to measure it. There's no specific study or there's no specific measurement that I've done that shows that those are the most beneficial. It's just something that I do because I can measure that out no matter where I'm at and be like, okay, I know this is a mid shin box, that's good enough for me. So I can be here, I can be at someone else's gym. Maybe they don't have the exact same boxes that I'm always using, but if I'm kind of aiming for like that mid shin height, for low, somewhere just below the knee for moderate, and then if I want a high box, it's gonna be above the knee, then I can pretty much measure that out wherever I'm at. So when you do single leg, what I like to do is whatever leg I'm jumping off of from the ground, I'm just going to land on the opposite leg as I get on top of this box. Some people like to bounce and then cycle their leg quickly to get on top of the box. That's fine. Remember, when you're doing depth jumps, the only thing you're really focused on is that reaction off the ground. Everything after that is just landing as safely as you can, so you can do multiple reps on this. So we're gonna do 4 reps on each side. Might need to scoot this back a little bit. There we go. We'll go 4 reps onto the other. So 3 sets of that, 3 sets of that, and then we'll move on to the altitude drops. Last thing I'm doing for today is some altitude drops from a high box landing on 2 feet. High box here, this is about 1 meter in height. I'm gonna be trying to land and stick the landing as I hit the ground, trying to be in somewhat of like an athletic stance here, so I don't wanna get too low on that landing. But the main thing here is the landing should be stiff. You wanna hit the landing and stop all momentum going down, stop your hips from lowering, stop everything from crashing down into the floor, and just trying to stick that landing. And we're gonna do 4 reps there. The height of the box should be high in comparison to your ability to decelerate. So if you find yourself hitting the floor and your hips continue to drop down and your knees continue to flex after you've already made contact with the ground, then the box is too high. Lower it down a little bit and try to stick that landing and try to stop all downward momentum as quickly as you can here. So should look a little something like this. That was a good rep. Last one here. Oh, there we go. That's a good rep. Let me show you a bad rep just so you guys can see what I mean by not crashing down to the ground. But what you should be trying to do is initiate contact through the ball of the foot and stick that landing as quickly as you can. Here's an example of a bad rep, and you'll see the collapse there. So that initial contact with the ground, the hips continue to lower, and then you bring yourself back to a standing position. That's what I would consider a bad rep when doing an altitude drop. But I'm gonna do 3 sets of that, 4 reps total on each, and then that's gonna be it for the entirety of today's session. Other than that, I appreciate y'all for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.